I think there are a couple things for us to learn from Paul in Philippians when he says, here's what I want you to know, Philippians. Everything that's happened to me, there's a lot of bad stuff. It's okay because when it happened, it helped the gospel advance forward. Paul was able to look at his life and see that God was the orchestrator of every experience he had. And even though the experiences were negative, horrible at times, he had hope in them because he believed God was using them to accomplish his purposes. Notice that Paul was not saying his life was full of pleasure, and riches, and wealth. His life, a life of faithfulness to Jesus, was a life of suffering and difficulty. He was imprisoned. And he's saying, I'm okay with that because that's not what my life is about. My life is not about gaining wealth, promotion, reaching levels of ambition, career advancement, saving millions of dollars, having a great investment fund. If that's what his life was about, this would have been a defeat. He considered it a victory because even though his life was tough, he saw in his life God's hand working towards God's purposes. And that was what Paul believed he was on the earth for. You'll remember from the last video that this word means that the gospel is advancing just a little bit here and there. Like this isn't like these big leap forwards, but that was okay with Paul. Sometimes in our life, we have to trust that God is doing what he's doing, even when it's in small incremental steps forward. God is working all things together for good in the lives of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So when we're living for his purpose, we can know that everything in our life is working towards that good. Not just random good, but that good, God's purposes. Even when it's just small, subtle, incremental movements. Sometimes we won't be able to see the growth and the progress. It's like going out in my front yard right now, trying to grow some flowers. I could go out and spend 2 or 3 hours watching those flowers and I would see no growth. But if I left, came back a week later, I would see tons of growth. Sometimes in our lives, we can't see what God's doing. We definitely can't understand the pace of it. We see very little small incremental changes, or we see none at all. But God is still at work, using our lives to help expand his glory on the earth. And if that's what our lives are obsessed with, if that's what our lives are for, then we can take joy even in that moment.